In order to accelerate the transition away from fossil fuels and towards less polluting alternatives, we need an all-in approach to the world of electrification. We need better, more affordable and more reliable mass transit. We need cities that are better designed to allow people to use lower speed solutions like bicycles, scooters and electric one-wheels. We need cities that are more pedestrian friendly. And in the world of telecommuting, we need to stop planning our communities around the increasingly old-fashioned notion that everyone needs to commute to a large factory or business to do a day's honest work, because frankly, if we can eliminate the need to commute for many people, we can drastically reduce our emissions overnight. Discussion of all of the above is better suited to amazing YouTube channels like Not Just Bikes and City Nerd, to name just two. But the other key thing we need to do is to make electric vehicles more affordable for those who definitely need to have a personal vehicle of their own. In parts of the world, we are starting to see that, bit by bit. Automakers in Europe, for example, are starting to embrace the concept of low-speed electric quadricycles, a market segment that was, not so long ago, mercilessly mocked by the auto industry en masse. And in some countries, Chinese-made EVs are entering the marketplace in a way that shakes up the status quo as violently as Japanese automakers did in the 70s and 80s, and as much as Korean automakers shook up the market in the 1990s and noughties. Companies like BYD, XPeng and many more are now bringing new affordable vehicles to many markets that cross-shop against more expensive models from established brands. They are doing so at a price point that is impossible for many more established brands to match. What's more, many of those vehicles are acing their crash tests, matching or beating those from traditional automotive brands. And again, those vehicles are winning awards from journalists and consumers alike. In Europe and North America, tariffs are currently being discussed and in some places enacted to try and dissuade consumers from buying Chinese-made EVs. These tariffs are being put in place to overcome what some countries and automakers allege is unfair support being given to Chinese automakers by the Chinese government. Support that means those Chinese automakers can export and sell their vehicles overseas for far less than automakers from Europe, North America and other parts of Asia can. And we recently made a video on this very channel discussing that very thorny topic. And as I noted in that video, and as many in the industry have predicted, Chinese automakers like BYD aren't giving up on selling in North America just because of tariffs. BYD already offers its electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles for sale in Mexico, and just last week it submitted paperwork to the Canadian government indicating that eventually it wants to sell its EVs in Canada. While I and many others don't want unfair anti-competitive pricing, I do think it's time for North America, specifically the US, to rethink its attitudes to Chinese-made EVs from companies like BYD. Because executed correctly, it could revolutionize the country's EV adoption rates without harming domestic manufacturers. Because I'm going to be touching on Chinese-made EVs in this video, I'm also going to have to discuss politics. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but remember, politics are everywhere and influence everything we do. So let's start with the obvious things. China has done some really nasty things to its citizens, to certain ethnic groups, and is known to have relationships with countries not known for being soft, fluffy, kind, caring places. But the US and many other countries around the world that also tend to criticize China are not exactly free from their own skeletons in the closet. It is possible to call out a country for doing bad stuff while also explaining what needs to change for that bad stuff to improve. And look, every country on the earth has a list of things that need to be changed to improve life for its citizens. And I note this not to be controversial or to make false equivalencies or indeed to make light of one group or country or another. I'm acknowledging China's current human rights violations and noting that in covering Chinese-made EVs, that doesn't mean we condone its actions. So Let's start this video by asking why Chinese-made EVs are not welcomed in many countries around the world, and why many more countries around the world have outright bans or heavy tariffs on importing EVs. Basically, it's about protectionism, and it's not about safety, as many people would like to suggest. Admittedly, a few decades ago, Chinese-made EVs were not great on safety nor reliability, but they've come a long way in the last decade, just as Japanese and South Korean brands were ridiculed for years. I'm sure I could find many a clip mocking Kia hatchbacks from 30 years ago. Chinese automakers, like those companies that came before, are now known for high quality and good value. Earlier this year, the BYD Seal and the BYD Dolphin were both selected as top 3 finalists for World Car of the Year and World Urban Car of the Year. They picked up awards at the 2023 Japan EV of the Year competition, and in markets where the two models are sold, they are snapping custom away from both established legacy brands and more expensive brands like Tesla. And I've watched that transition, the relentless growth and adaptation and innovation that, frankly, even Tesla is now struggling to keep up with. About 11 years ago, I and my co-host of the channel at the time, the lovely Mark Chatterley, headed to an event in the UK where BYD was offering drives of its E6 electric crossover for the very first time. By the way, Mark is just fine and dandy and working for an awesome charity in the UK, and we miss him here at this channel every single day. Hi, Mark. Our first drive of that BYD E6 was terrifying. It was underpowered. The car couldn't easily tackle a steep hill without slowing to well under city road speeds, and it had the handling of a brick sliding on bowling balls. But since then, BYD and its vehicles have become so much better. Sadly, because I'm based here in the US, I've not had much of a chance to experience the latest BYD vehicles for myself. But not a single person I've spoken to who has had the chance to drive one has had anything nasty to say about it. And much of that progress has been made possible by BYD's sheer market share. It is the world's second largest battery electric automaker, and its electric bus and truck divisions are equally prominent in the global marketplace. BYD also focuses on massive vertical integration, making everything in-house wherever possible for all of its vehicles, from battery packs through to motors, power electronics, and so much more. Vertical integration means less overheads and more price stability, something Tesla has preached itself, and BYD owns its own supply chain for a given product, just like Tesla has tried to do as well. And some of BYD's progress has been made possible thanks to massive financial investment into the EV industry by the Chinese government. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the Chinese government has spent more than $230.9 billion equivalent in supporting the growth of EVs in China. This ranges from consumer purchase incentives, which vary according to where you live and how much money you make, through to government procurement, i.e., vehicles being purchased by the Chinese government for use in its own fleets. It extends through to things like sales tax exemption, infrastructure funding, and then funds sent for research and development at those companies. It's those entire collection of massive subsidies over 15 years that have allowed companies like BYD to accelerate their quality and their technology so briskly. That, and I will also admit in some instances, a flexible attitude in China towards copyright and IP. That, and of course, it's also based in the country with the world's largest automotive market. According to conservative estimates, there are more than 200 different companies in China producing EVs today, and the majority of those aren't producing EVs that cross-shop against established legacy brands or well-known non-Chinese brands. Those that are, however, are doing so with the benefit of all of that research and development time, and now benefit from how China treats domestic EV manufacturers, and are happy and willing to use their position to expand that market share outside of China. Legacy automakers around the world are mad about this. They haven't spent the last 15 years refining EV technology with government help, and while most are now making EVs for sale in the US, Canada, Europe and elsewhere in the world, and some are even partnering with Chinese brands to sell in China and abroad, they aren't at a point to compete against companies like BYD, which has that vertical integration to make rapid changes in products, drive down price and leave rivals standing. There is a reason why some of BYD's largest shareholders, aside from its CEO, are institutional investors that you will know like Vanguard, Fidelity and UBS. And if your mutual fund, 401k or IRA is with one of those firms, congratulations, BYD is helping to pay for your retirement. But let's be clear, despite what you might have heard, we already have Chinese-made EVs in the US marketplace. The Polestar 2 is made in China, as are some of Volvo's EVs. And they're both generally higher-end models with higher sticker prices that don't ruffle feathers as much among domestic production as low-priced EVs entering the marketplace. But BYD, thanks to its sheer volume of vehicle production, something that other firms like XPeng are quickly following behind, are able to bring vehicles to market using economies of scale that legacy and domestic automakers simply cannot manage. Tesla, had it focused on affordable vehicles, may have found itself at the point where it was price competitive against BYD. But despite its promises to bring affordable vehicles to market, it has continuously ploughed money into higher-end vehicles, two of which I am going to argue were more complicated than they really needed to be in order to satisfy the whims of the company's CEO. While I know that there are people out there willing to come to Tesla's defense on this, it has been pretty clear from day one that Tesla wasn't interested in affordable, but rather desirable. And that's okay, but it's definitely not the same market segment that BYD currently occupies. BYD's entry-level vehicles don't focus on performance. They focus on affordability. And while BYD does have higher-end, more performance-oriented models and brands, it just literally started producing a sports car that could give most high-end hypercars a run for their money, its entry-level models are fitted with modest-sized LFP battery packs that offer modest ranges per charge. And most importantly, they're smaller and more efficient than anything we're seeing on sale in the US or Canada right now. Those battery packs, specifically BYD's Blade battery packs, BYD did, by the way, start as a battery firm, are so good that many automakers, including Tesla, are now buying them for their own vehicles. So why aren't we just allowing the cars too? As I alluded to earlier, protectionism. Protectionism and, to some extent, worries about security. Chinese-owned EVs imported to the US are seen by some as a security threat, with claims that your personal data could be leaked back to a Chinese operative for nefarious purposes. But in the modern world, where we're seeing everything slowly becoming enshittificated, everything we do is captured and stored somewhere by someone for a later profit, with no money to you. Our content on this channel has been scraped by companies providing training data for AI. And while it's a weird honour to think 20 of our videos have been deemed good enough to train AI, I'd much rather our content wasn't used in that way. And given the number of people who've reached out to me lately to ask if I have been voicing TikTok videos on the side, which I surely haven't, I've got a funny feeling my voice has been scraped to create a digital AI version of me too. It recently convinced my wife that I had voiced over a video about a border collie, and that is plausible, but I was like, nope, that wasn't me. So really it is about protectionism. The Chinese government has given automakers in China a good 15 years of financial support for EVs. And while the current subsidies per car offered to Chinese firms is far less than the $7,500 that the US federal government is offering in tax credits on US-made electric vehicles, automakers in the US know they can't match companies like BYD in terms of price or profit. So they want to do everything they can to keep those vehicles as far away as possible from US consumers. And every time a US automaker gets an EV priced down to a really good price point, they stop making it and replace it with a more powerful, heavier, larger and more expensive model. At least that's been the status quo in the EV industry thus far. But look, I think there's room in the market for both, and I'd like to explain it to you. Someone considering an affordable family hatchback that's good for 180 miles of real-world range, can seat an adult and a few kids and has enough luggage space for the weekly shop, is not going to drop extra money on a larger, more powerful model unless that is the only option they have. And legacy automakers in the US have stopped making small affordable cars. The EVs that do exist are being built with a focus on autonomous driving and long range and fast charging. Many consumers do want that, but many more convince themselves that's what they need. But the reality is, most people don't want that. And if the US government is serious about accelerating the transition to electric vehicles, it needs to allow those lower cost, lower spec models to come into the country and fill the need that domestic automakers aren't. Ford and others say a more affordable, smaller EV is on the way. Jim Farley, for example, CEO of Ford, has even gone on the record to say that customers need to fall in love with small cars again as part of the transition to electric. But until Ford, GM, Volkswagen and so many more, including Tesla, bring more affordable, smaller, efficient models to market, we can choose to allow companies like BYD to fill that space, or we just find ourselves delaying the transition to electric, a transition we cannot allow to slow down. Ask anyone who's been caught up in this summer's onslaught of heat waves, tornadoes, floods, hurricanes and forest fires how they'd feel about that. And while we're at it, let's spend a moment talking about robotaxis, because many of you will be arguing that robotaxis are the affordable solution for the masses, the panacea of transportation. But unless we have regulation prohibiting rush and demand pricing, unless we have proper regulations concerning safety and licensing, and unless we have a robust set of checks and balances to ensure robotaxis are both following the rules of the road and capable of safe operation at all times, we're stuck in the same promised cycle of next year, boys, that we've heard from Elon Musk for more than a decade. And that decade has proven that we can't keep relying on one company to solve mass transit for everyone else. How do we make this happen? Is there a way to offer protection to US-made cars built by well-paid union employees on US production lines while also satisfying a lower-end price point? I think there is. First, like any car, BYD and any other Chinese firms bringing new models to the US to sell need to pass homologation, just like they do in Europe with flying colours. Next, we need to continue to offer incentives on US-made vehicles, just as China has offered incentives to its industry. But offer additional incentives for US companies making smaller, more everyday vehicles, and reduce incentives as vehicles get larger. While some people do need full-size vehicles, I have a Ford F-150 Lightning primarily because of work requirements and the fact we live out in the boonies and we haul animal feed, gardening stuff and wood. The majority of people who have a full-size pickup don't even use it as such. The majority of people don't even need a full-size SUV. Most folks could get by with a smaller vehicle like the hatchbacks and sedans that companies like BYD, MG, XPeng and others make and offer in Europe that other firms aren't. If smaller vehicles made in the US get more incentives, automakers will make them. And if Chinese imports threaten to capture that segment, it provides a metaphorical fire up the bum to companies currently moaning about how difficult it is to make EVs and no one wants them. Start by allowing Chinese firms to bring vehicles in. And yeah, sure, Tariff them if you want, but remember that tariffs are taxes on people buying the product, not the companies making them. And if people do buy the product, incentivize domestic manufacturers to make them too. Spark healthy competition. BYD already makes EVs with price tags of around $20,000 equivalent. If we are serious about transitions to EVs, don't we want to ensure those more affordable models are available to anyone who wants them? Or is it really just about ensuring rich shareholders and CEOs get richer? And if it's the latter, come on, does that really help alleviate climate change? Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of more than the 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure we can be 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There are a range of different tiers you can sign up for from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just under $11 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Biggs Bronson, Philip Panya, Stephen Trudeau, Laura Connolly, Paul Giblin, Kaboombox, Oliver, John Franks, Bill Lascelle, Brent Smith, Terry and Rich UK, Wendy Kelly Budenbaum, Joe Hamlin, Ilian Oster, Brian Curry, Chelsea Williams, and Adekunle Ferinya. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member and get your moment of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at, address also below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store in the down below. This month, we're talking about accessibility with our latest t-shirt design, and keep your eyes peeled for a brand new special t-shirt for our trip to Everything Electric in Canada next month. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you're subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we think that this one is also well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving!